Okay, today we're going to talk about Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. I had someone several months back ask me to do a video on the Nephilim, and I've been putting it off. One of the main reasons I've put it off is because it really doesn't matter what you believe on this topic. Genesis chapter 6 is very debatable passage. There's a lot of different beliefs and what it means, and it really doesn't matter in our salvation. And I don't necessarily believe that a misinterpretation of this passage really affects much of your doctrine in the rest of the Bible. But someone requested it, so let's go over it today. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air. And it repented me that I have made them. There are three popular interpretations. These are the three main interpretations of this passage. The most common interpretation, the one I see, I've been preached this to myself. I actually used to believe this. The view is, and it's what you'll see on TikTok and YouTube because it's what Hollywood is promoted. It's the view that holds that the sons of God were fallen angels, and that they took human wives. So these angels, they were either sitting in heaven, and they saw these women on earth, and they saw how attractive they were, and they chose to leave to go marry and have relations, physical relations with these women, and produce a hybrid offspring. There's been movies made about this, TV shows made about this, and it's something that is very intriguing. I think as our human nature is to want to believe the extraordinary, crazy stuff. So that's why I think this is such a popular belief. The angels breeding with the women, it's taught that they produced a hybrid offspring, and the hybrid offspring is either the giants or the Nephilim. That's the Hebrew word. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The second interpretation is the sons of God. They're not angels, but they are the descendants of Seth. Adam had three sons mentioned: Cain, Abel, and Seth. And Cain killed Abel. So Cain, they are calling the bad guy, right? The ungodly line. And this interpretation would call Seth the godly line. In this interpretation, the sons of God are godly descendants of Seth, Adam's righteous son, while the daughters of men are the ungodly descendants of Cain. Their intermarriage symbolizes the breakdown of moral and spiritual boundaries leading to widespread sin. And the last interpretation, which I haven't seen a lot of, just doing this study is where I saw this third interpretation. And it's that the sons of God may symbolize rulers or kings claiming divine descent, that they are divine or came from gods, right? So these rulers are saying they're gods. And you see this in history, right? There's people that believe that Alexander the Great was a god, and all these people had divine attributes to them, who oppressed the people and took multiple wives. So these men that believed that they were divine, or other people believed they were divine, the sons of God, they're calling themselves, and that they took wives against those women's will. They just took them and had those wives to themselves. So the sons of God took the daughters of men. And in this, the Nephilim or the giants could represent legendary heroes or figures in ancient mythology. Okay, so that's a third interpretation. I believe this interpretation is not biblical because it doesn't say that these men thought they were the sons of God or thought they were gods. The Bible actually says the sons of God. So that's where I think this one just is probably an interpretation for people that don't really believe that Scripture is infallible. Let's go through the Scriptures here. Let's see which one we think may have the most viability. Let's look at who are the sons of God. Are these sons of God really angels, or are these sons of God believers? So let's look at that. So I'm going to go I don't make you turn to all of these. In Job chapter 2, verse 1, it says again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. Man, I hate to get off on a sidetrack, but all the cartoons that are still popular believe that Satan is in hell with a pitchfork, and that's his abode, and that's where he's at. It's not. Satan, right here in Job chapter 2, he's presenting himself before the Lord with the sons of God. Now, most believe in Job chapter 2, verse 1, that these sons of God are angels. Job chapter 38, verse 7, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. That's Job 38, 7. So there's the sons of God again. Probably that is the angels. I get that. Now, Romans chapter 8, verse 14. Who else could be sons of God? For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. If you're led by the Spirit of God, you are the sons of God. Philippians 2:15, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world. 1 John 3:1, behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. 1 John 3:2, beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So what we see here is that there are several passages that show that the sons of God can be angels, but the sons of God can also be believers that are led by the Spirit of God. So that doesn't help us know which one it is. So we need some other passage or scripture to tell us, okay, who are the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6, verses 2 and verses 4? What other clues do we have? When someone asked me to do a study on the Nephilim, I'll be honest, I had to Google what it was. And I found out that the Nephilim is the Hebrew word. It's not an English word. And so the King James Bible does not have the word Nephilim in it. The King James Bible translates the word as giants. Now, most of the other modern translations do not translate the word. They transliterate the word and they leave it as Nephilim. So they don't translate it to an English word. Now, we don't normally do that. You normally translate a word. Now, why did they do that? I'm not so sure. We're going to go through it a little bit. Now, the reason people believe that these Nephilim, okay, that it is fallen angels, is because they say that the root word of Nephil comes from Nephal, which is another Hebrew word, which is the verb form of it. And they say that that word means to fall. And so they are taking that root word that they're saying is a root word, and they're saying since that kind of means to fall, then the Nephilim must also mean to fall. And there's a fallen nature, and that's why they think that they're fallen angels or the offspring of fallen angels. But does that hold up to the rest of Scripture? One of the main reasons I don't believe it does, okay? This word Nephil or Nephilim shows up 3 times in our Bible. 3 times in our Bible. Genesis 6:4 shows up once, and then it shows up 2 times in Numbers 13:33. Okay? That's the only 3 times that this word shows up. In most modern translations, all 3 times they do not translate the word. They just leave it as Nephilim. In the King James Bible, they translate it as giants all 3 times. Okay, so which one is correct? In Genesis chapter 7, verse 23, this is Noah's flood. What was God's purpose of Noah's flood? And it says in Genesis chapter 7, verse 23, and every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping things and the fowl of heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. So, Genesis chapter 7, verse 23. Now, this is a Bible view. This isn't what you believe. I'm not going to argue about that. What the Bible teaches is that God destroyed everything else that wasn't on the ark except for fish and water species like that. But all other flesh he destroyed unless you were on that ark. So there was 8 souls on that ark, Noah and his 3 sons and their wives, and Noah's wife. That's who was on the ark that was human. That's all that survived the flood. So, if we go to Numbers chapter 13, and verse 33, it says, and there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Now, the new versions here will say, instead of giants, it'll say, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, or which come of the Nephilim. Okay? So, were these giants or these Nephilim were they a hybrid race, descendants of fallen angels? Well, if they were in Genesis, if that's what that word means in Genesis chapter 6, then that's what that word should mean in Numbers 13. And in Numbers 13 here, if we say that this was the hybrid race of angels and humans, then we would have to conclude that they did it before the flood. These angels came down and they bred with women and produced a hybrid race called Nephilim. Then we would have to believe, if you believe the Bible, that God destroyed them. Because it says in Genesis chapter 7, verse 23, that God destroyed all flesh that wasn't on that ark. So he destroyed that hybrid race. Now in Numbers 13:33, if we have that, we have the Nephilim word shows back up. So if that's the hybrid race of fallen angels and women, then you must believe that this happened a second time. That angels came down a second time and bred with women and produced a new race of Nephilim or mighty men. I think that's hard to believe. I don't see any scriptural evidence that says that this happened. What I see is what the King James Bible translates this as. In Genesis chapter 6, there were giants in the earth. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, there were giants in the earth. Now, where did we get these giants? Where did we get these giants? If they were not an offspring, which I don't believe they were. I don't believe they could be an offspring of the angels because I don't believe it happened a second time. If God destroyed the earth because it happened the first time, he didn't destroy it. I don't even see that he's mad about these giants here in Numbers 13. There's no evidence that God's even mad of how these giants came to be. Let's talk about how tall are these giants. Giants are in the Bible multiple times. How tall are these giants? Well, the tallest of the giants is found in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. He's the only one that remained. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, after the cubit of a man. So his bed was, I'll do the math for you, a cubit's about 18 inches. His bed was about 13 and a half feet long. That's all we know about King Og, king of Bashan. His bed was 13 and a half feet long. Now, we normally don't make beds shorter than we are, so we're going to say he's at least less than 13 and a half feet tall. Okay? So, that's the tallest mentioned in the Bible. So, whenever we read in Numbers 13:33, where it says, and we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, so were we in their sight. Now that doesn't mean that the giants were so big that the size of these men, these Israelites, were grasshoppers to these giants. The tallest one mentions 13 and a half feet, and average man is around 6 feet, 5'11". So that's twice as big, right? A little bit over twice as big. If Og was actually 13 feet tall, that's twice as big. So it's not really like grasshopper. These are the men that didn't have faith that they could go do what God said to go do, to go conquer those nations and go take that land. And they come back saying, where's grasshoppers? They're exaggerating. They're exaggerating the story. And the 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, they come back and they say, we can take that land. They didn't say that these, giants were so big that they couldn't take them. It kind of reminds me of the other famous giant, right? Goliath, where everyone was afraid of Goliath. And David, this little boy, goes out and defeats Goliath. Well, Goliath, he's a big story, right? It's a famous story, Goliath. How big was Goliath? Description of Goliath's height in 1 Samuel 17:4. 6 cubits and a span, that would be 6 times 18 plus 9, 117 inches, or 9 feet 9 inches. So Goliath was only about 9 feet 9 inches. Now that's a tall man. That's a tall man. But how tall is that? Shaquille O'Neal's over 7 feet, right? There's a 14-year-old. I saw a video the other day. There's a 14-year-old that's already taller than Shaq. So he's a tall kid. We have the tallest man in recorded history was Robert Wadlow from Alton, Illinois, who measured 8 feet 11 inches. 8 feet 11 inches. So he's only 10 inches smaller than Goliath. That's a modern man. He was born February 22nd, 1918. And he grew to that height due to an overactive pituitary gland, which caused an abnormal high level of growth hormone. Okay? As of December 2024, the tallest living man is Sultan Kosain from Turkey, standing at 8 feet, almost 3 inches. 2.82 inches, 8 feet 3 inches. That's a person living today. Kosain, exceptional height, results from a condition known as pituitary giantism, which leads to an overproduction of growth hormone. Okay, so do we have to believe that giants were a production of fallen angels and women? No. I believe that it's just genetics. I believe that it's just genetics. We don't know what the genetics of Adam and Eve were. I believe that Adam and Eve had the ability to produce giants and to produce smaller people, shorter people. And I believe in microevolution. That's not the macroevolution. That's not where I believe that we came from, an amoeba and it eventually evolved into a human or a monkey or something like that. I believe that God gave us genetic code. He gave us genetic code. I believe a dog-like species had the code to produce many different traits. And if you interbreed those traits and the environment helps select those certain traits, then you will get variety. So you take the same 2 dog-like species and you put them in Africa, there will be a different type dog that survives in Africa than if you put the same 2 dog-like species up in Siberia. What you'll find is in Siberia, you will have dogs, the traits that produce dogs that can survive in cold weather will be the what survives. And in the warm climates, it will be the dogs that can survive in the heat that will survive. Now, that is not new information being added by mutations into the genetic code. That's just the dogs had the ability to produce offspring. They produce 2 dogs. 2 dogs mate. They produce 2 dogs. If one dog has short hair and the other dog has long hair and they live in Siberia, the short-haired dog has a good chance of freezing to death, okay? So now you're left with a long-haired dog. 2 dogs over here also produce 2 dogs, and the long-haired dog survives. These 2 long-haired dogs meet each other and they breed. There's a good chance that they're going to have a long-haired offspring. And if they have a short-haired offspring, the short-haired dog has a chance of freezing to death. And so what you end up doing is you end up breeding out the ability to have short-haired dogs. In 200 years, we took dogs And we produce like every breed of dog that you can think of. Giant dogs to little teeny micro dogs. And they all are still 100% dog. They are not some result of a mutation. So we have a Labradoodle. And Labradoodles are very popular because you get the traits of a lab, which are real friendly, but you get the hyperallergenic, non-shedding traits of a poodle. But when they take a lab and a poodle, labs shed, poodles don't, and they breed them, what they'll get is some of the dogs will shed and some of the dogs will not shed. And so what they do is they take the dogs that don't shed and they breed another poodle and lab over here. And whenever they get a dog that doesn't shed, then they take those two dogs that don't shed and they breed them back together. And so you take two non-shedding Labradoodles and they call that a second generation Labradoodle. And that's how you breed out the ability to shed. You didn't gain the ability not to shed. You bred out the ability to shed. Okay? And I hate to get into all that, but it's related to the giants here because we don't know what the genetic makeup of Adam and Eve were. But I believe in that genetic makeup, Adam and Eve had the ability to have short people and tall people in their genetics. And if you breed and you're in a climate, I'm sure that large giants take more food, and the survival rate in certain conditions is not going to be as good as what a small person can survive in certain conditions. And I would say that probably the giant genes may have gotten bred out of most cultures. But is it possible that a 9-foot, what was Goliath? Goliath was 9-foot, 9-inch person was just genetics? Absolutely. We've got today 8-foot, 11-inch people, 8-foot, 3-inch people. They've got some disorders, but if we can have them with some disorders, maybe the giants had disorders. I don't know. But I don't think it's some divine intervention. I don't think giants are part of a divine intervention. I think they're 100% human that are just from the genes of their parents. Also, there's a lot of things on the internet that will tell you that there's all this ancient history that's been hidden of all of these giant graves, these graves of these giant skeletons and bones, and they're just enormous, 20, 30 feet tall, all this stuff. And I will tell you that as Christians, we want to take that stuff and believe it because it justifies that the scriptures are accurate, and it verifies what we've been telling people, that the Bible's true. But I will tell you this, I have found no evidence that any of those stories or any of those claims of giant fossils or giant graves and skeletons, I have not found any proof that any of that has been verified and that it's true. Most of it has been verified to be false. So be careful promoting or spreading those unless you can find some kind of verification. We do not need that to still stand firm that the scriptures are accurate. Now, I want to go back to Genesis 6 here real quick. Let's just look at the passage. Does it even leave room? Does it even say that the offspring of these sons of God were the Nephilim? So let's look at that. Let's read it really slow. And it came, Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto men, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Right there. People used to live before that 900 years, 600 years. Here, God says you're going to be limited to, you're only going to be 120 years. You can Google that. That's pretty much what people live. 116 to 120 years is about what people live. The oldest people in the world. Okay, so just a prophecy there that has stood the test of time. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So I have a problem with the Nephilim, that this is a hybrid offspring of the giants, because it doesn't say that. There were giants in the earth. There were Nephilim in the earth in those days. And also after that, after what? After there were giants in the earth, after there were Nephilim in the earth, there were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, after there were giants, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men were, they were the people that became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Not the Nephilim, not the giants. Should I get into this? I use the King James Bible. I've got friends that use modern versions. So, but there's a lot of people, a lot of churches, a lot of YouTube channels, TikTok channels that are trying to get people like me, like you, just average Joes that living a normal life with a job, raising a family, trying to serve the Lord. They're trying to convince you that you need to understand Greek and you need to understand Hebrew. There's people that are spending church services trying to teach you Hebrew and teach you Greek. And there's men in the pulpit that have had 1 or 2 Hebrew classes or 1 or 2 Greek classes, and they're standing up there and telling you this word is better translated as this. This word really means this. Can I just question and say, says who? You've had 2 classes and you're going to correct translators that were some of the greatest linguistic minds, were some of the greatest language scholars that have ever lived, and they joined together as a committee and they reviewed and bounced ideas off each other, and they come up with, I'm going to translate this word Nephilim as giant, and you're going to say, no, that's not correct? I got to question you, not question the translators. To me, I think we're wasting some time. Now, if you're trying to translate stuff for to help reach Hebrew people, and you need to translate a book into Hebrew or something, I mean, now we have software that does that, I guess, but maybe you study it for that. But if you're trying to just understand the Bible, I think you're wasting a lot of time learning Greek and Hebrew, and you should just spend more time studying the English. There's enough. If you just study the English, I don't know, I don't have time to study the Hebrew and the Greek, and I don't get anything out of it. Normally, just leads me astray. See, right here, where people looked at the verb means to fall, it led them down a road where they're going to believe that the Nephilim must be this fallen race, and I just don't see it in Scripture. I don't see it supported by Scripture. So I kind of believe in that second interpretation, but I'll put my spin on it. What's the second interpretation? Well, verse 4, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men and bare children unto them. I just think the sons of God here are people that are believers. That's my belief, that these are believers and they are breeding with non-believers, and things got out of hand. The righteous, there was not a divide between the righteous and the unrighteous. They were intermixing, and things got very wicked. And God said, I've had enough. And he found Noah. Noah found grace in his sight. That's the only people that survived. So that's what I believe. And I don't believe it was a Sethly line, because I believe that Adam and Eve had many children. So I just believe it's believers intermixing with non-believers, which is condemned in the Bible in multiple locations. So we could study that another time. I know I've been long-winded. We covered a lot. If you have any questions or comments, you can private message me, text me, or you can leave a comment, and I will try to answer you if you have any follow-up questions. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you following along.